So
What was your question?
let's talk about parenting with collectivism and how you think about that.
Well, you're saying that you have something to disagree with me about.
Yeah, so we were talking that how people are parenting in like Asia country are bad, right? Because they would do everything for the kid, or not all of them would not do anything for the kid, and the kid gotta do everything by himself. And sometimes they would treat the kid bad because they just feel like it, or they don't have any reason to do anything, right? They just beat the kid up for no reason, correct? So, but the case is not every parents are like that. Some parents would work their life so hard just because the kid said, "Oh, I want to learn more. I want to go to this school. I want to get better. I want to do this." Even though they don't have money, they would still trying so hard to make the money that the kid want, and just give it all to the kid, right? So I'm saying that not every parents using collectivism is wrong.
But why do you think that that's collectivist? I think you're confused on what you mean by collectivism.
So
Where is the collectivism in that? Like, what do you think is collectivism? What do you think that means?
like people lacking of reason and just acting on emotion only, like most of the time, right?
No. So collectivism is like the opposite of individualism, right? And you know what individualism is, right? It's
Yeah.
the support that the individual is the most important minority. It's the only minority that exists, right? So when people say like there's minorities, like there's black people, there's blah blah blah,
Mhm.
right? And again, it's like a Marxist term, right? But there only is one individual, and that's it. There is no groups of people. There is no X people versus X people. Everyone is an individual. And under the Reich political system, everyone is equal that way. Because if you ever word it not like that, then you're just a collectivist again. And by collectivist society, you could say things like Japan, right? So that they care a lot more about what other people think about them. So they care about the group things. That's an example of what like collectivism. So, but collectivist parenting, I guess an example of that would be like if I have my kid learn piano when he's very young because I want other people to know that my kid is successful and that I'm a good parent and that I caused him to do that. Look what I did. You know, the parents, like the moms, they always talk about their kids and where the college they're going to.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good example of like collectivist parenting.
Okay.
But what you're talking about is more like, is it okay to sometimes be, uh, like, what's the word?
Not emotion, right?
Not emotion, but like negligent with my parenting.
Okay.
You know what negligent means, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to say or no? Like, is it okay to fuck up a little bit, not know what I'm doing exactly, just kind of?
Like just like how you say like love at the first sight, right? Like you don't know who that person is. You're just like, okay, I'm in love, and I'm just gonna do whatever for it. It's
Yeah,
kind of
but
like that.
that's not like reasonable because you're going into a position where you're justifying the ends, right? Instead of the means. So you're saying that because my kid ended up like kind of okay, I guess that means my parenting was like okay. I guess it was justified.
Well, it's more like
Because like your parent could hit you and beat you and everything, and then if you end up being like a rich guy, people could be like, use the bias, saying that because X thing happened, that must have caused this, or because I was kind of a shitty parent and the kid turned out good, that means I'm not a shitty parent. Because remember, parents want to not feel like they're bad parents. They never want to blame themselves, right? They always first blame society on something that went wrong with you. If not, they blame you, and then they blame themselves, right? It's kind of like a hierarchy of roles. But with like Asian parents or more traditional parents, they blame you and then society and then themselves.
mm,
At least that's what I've seen. I think it's closer to that. Because I know it's like that in Mexico. Like Mexican parents are like that as well. Like I think more first world countries like America, or like England or something, like more rich countries, they blame society first. Like you notice how a lot of like first world countries they talk about like shit that just doesn't matter, right? Like first world problems. like, oh, this one specific thing, like this marketing, I don't like this ad, I don't like how if it's like racist or whatever this shit, right? And meanwhile, in like Africa, they don't give a fuck about stuff like that. They just care about just getting like their economy together, right? I'm not. When I say that, I don't mean like I'm making them sound like they're like cool or anything, but I'm saying that like there is a pattern in first world countries that they immediately want to blame other people than themselves. But you're talking about is it okay for them to have like the right intentions?
Yeah, they have the right intention even though they don't know if it's good.
Yeah, but there's
Or
no
like-
there's no standard. Do you know what I mean by when I say in my morality, right, or
Yeah.
objectivism, their standard is your life. So in that statement, there is no standard.
No.
Because like for example, like you know those like black women who just like raise kids, like they have like 1,000 kids, and they say like I take care of my children, you know, like I love my kid, but like they really don't, because if they really did love their kids, they wouldn't have so many and mistreat them and not have a like no father, right? Even though they're moms, they cannot admit that they're wrong, right? They cannot admit that they're bad parents. They use their parents, they use their kids for their own example. For example, there's even like moms who are like jealous of their daughters being attractive because they miss being like that. They actually feel envy. So like for example, there was even a time where I saw this white mom, right? And her daughter was getting so much attention that the mom actually wanted to hang out with her so that she could get attention in return. And then she justified it by saying, "Oh, I care about her safety, so I want to be around her." So it's like these are the lies that parents tell themselves after. Because it's really difficult to have a conversation with your parents about their intentions, especially with raising you, right? You can never just sit down with your parents and say, "Hey, so like, what did you do right here? What are some criticisms? What would you do better next time?" That's literally never happened, right? Like no one ever talks like that. Parents and kids cannot talk to each other because the parents will always see you as a little baby. Right? When you were a little kid and you like shit yourself in your pants, right? And you're like crying, they'll remember that. And then when you come up to them and you're talking to them seriously, right? And you're like fucking wearing a business suit and everything, they're not gonna take you seriously. They're always gonna remember that. It takes a lot of willpower for a parent to come to terms and saying like, "Hey, I fucked up a lot. Like, and I will like, and that like I could have been better." Instead, what parents do is they come to you and say, "Hey, I may be a bad dad, but like I tried my best and we got you an education." And you hear that all the time. Literally every parent says that. But like that shouldn't be an excuse to improve. And I feel like everyone who hears that doesn't improve on it. Because if you hear your parent tell you that, then you're gonna have your own kid. And then you're gonna fuck up, you're gonna make mistakes, and then you're gonna be like, well, instead of telling my kid, I'm just gonna lie to him, and then when it comes to it, I'm gonna say, well, I did my best, I was a good parent. And then your kid will remember that, and then he's gonna do it with his kid, and then over and over and over and over again, right? It's like a meme. It's really easy to fall into this trap because it takes away having responsibility. Remember, human beings do not like feeling responsible for their bad decisions. Taking responsibility is a really, really individualistic thing. So I guess you could maybe tie that with what you said about collectivism, right? Something that's very, unique to individualist societies, like America in the 1800s, right? Like when people were first coming to America, is that most people took responsibility for their losses, right? Like if they came here, they knew that they had to do something, and they knew that it was their fault if they didn't make it, right? This is why a lot of immigrants who come to America or something like that, they do this, they act that way, and they teach those ideas to their kids as well. And having that like personal responsibility makes them better thinkers, because it's a really good idea to start off with. It's kind of like planting a seed, right? And then like it grows into more ideas later, right? So personal responsibility is one of those really rare values that people don't have, let alone parents. And I think I never told you this, right? But oftentimes you become what you like worship, right? So like if you worship, for example, there's a girl, right, who I've heard who says, she makes the jokes a lot of saying like sugar daddies, right? She says, "Oh, this guy in this game, he's like a sugar daddy," right? And she says, "But not in real life, I wouldn't want that," right? But she keeps like saying it as a joke. But she really does want it, right? It's kind of like you come what you praise. Whatever you praise, like you will like. And it turns out that later now she started doing it on OnlyFans, right? So like it's really obvious when like people who don't know themselves give you answers that like no, you tell them, "Hey, like do you think this way?" And they'll tell you no, and then you just believe it, right? Because you just can take their word for it. So that's what's really hard about being like a analyzer or a philosopher these days, because almost everyone you talk to, you cannot trust that they know themselves enough. Like I could not have gone to that girl, or like you, right? You talk to that girl, and she says, no, I don't like that kind of stuff, and you would probably just take her word for it, right? It's really hard to have enough experience to know when she's like lying. So take everything I just said there and apply it to parenting. So if you see your dad now at your age right now, you may see him as like, and again, I don't know if you asked this question because this is what you think of your parents, but for example, let's just say here, right? They you apply the same philosophy, right? You tell them a question or you find out something, and then the answer is like, oh, I tried my best, right? And you have no way of checking that. There's no fact checking. There's just kind of, you just take their word for it. There's no other way to prove it. And you wouldn't do that in programming, and you wouldn't do it in your life, right? Like,
Right.
because knowledge is contextual. Like in programming, there's a big thing about having a program that checks something, and then something that checks the checker, right? Or like, like in Watchmen, it's who watches the watchman. Like if there's the police, who watches the police to find out if they're bad, and who watches them to see if they're doing bad, and so on and so on. So there is no that, not even like the second part when it comes to parenting and like talking to your parents.
So it's a win-lose situation when you talk to your parents.
Yeah.
Like always.
It's really difficult.
Most of the time, always.
Your parents would have to be really, really good. And this is, again, remember how I made this argument about how people who say, oh, I love my family, I love my parents, and I love hanging out with them, and I love being around them, and I want to be just like my dad, right? The argument is really dumb because it kind of tells you that they have so little like what's it called, like experience in life, that the only thing they want to do is what's the only thing they know from their parents. Like there's so much more to life to say, oh, I'm just gonna do whatever was given to me, right? I think it's one of the first things I fucking told you, like 2 years ago or something.
Because I was talking a lot about parents back then too, because my parents keep telling me to go back, right? Because they put me in a situation where they think that I'm gonna be safe for the rest of my life. So like
In
they
Vietnam?
working for like, yeah, like, right? So like for example, they found like a good business in Vietnam, right? So they'd be like, hey Dante, just stay in Vietnam, do this, and you're gonna be good.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do anything. America, you don't have to go find your American dream. Just do this, and you're gonna be good. Don't go find your adventures. We got it.
Yeah, so you see how another person would easily say like, well, I am used to taking orders. Like in school, I was raised to just do whatever I was told. And then I was told to go to school. I was told to go to college. I was told to listen to my professors and just keep listening, right? And then when they're thrown into the world, they become depressed and they don't know what they want, right? Even someone like you who is rebellious against what your parents asked, you still can feel that, like later. You can still feel like, I don't have a purpose, blah, blah, blah. Because your parents never like trained you for that kind of stuff. It was just like, listen to me. I know what you want, which is impossible, right? Like I can never know exactly what you want.
So you're saying that following orders from other people could lead to like really bad things, like just like you keep listening to what your parents do and not finding your own purposes, or like also bad.
Yeah, because only you can know what you want, right? Someone else cannot tell you what you want. Like someone can come to you and be like, hey, are you ready to order? And then you could be like, I don't know, what do you recommend, right? Like that's not the same example of what I'm saying, but it's also kind of like a consequence of thinking that way for so long, right? It becomes multi-layered to the point where little tiny things of what you want to order can affect your psychology, to the point where now you start asking like, what do I want from everything? Like you always want to have, you always want to be the main contributor to your choices. Like you shouldn't be the one making decisions, especially decisions that affect your career and your job and like your romantic interests, stuff like that. Because I still saw people who get into like relationships and they still ask their like friends and stuff like that, hey, should I get with this girl or not? Which is really weird, because to me something like that could you almost never ask someone else, especially like, I mean, you read the Fountainhead when Peter asks him, right? Like,
So like, should I go with Dominique or like ask his mom, right? Like,
well, that part too. Oh yeah. So when before that, in the very beginning, when he says, "Don't ask me about what you want. Like, don't ask others, especially about your work."
right.
Like, don't you know what you want?
I wrong accept that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's like super important, and I feel like that's one of the ideas that's like, and at least in objectivism, that's really hard to teach people. I feel like they almost have to read the Fountainhead to see like the power of like living like a Peter. I think people don't realize how common his ideas are in multiple people. I think people think they see someone, they read like, they think basic psychology is like X person has this thing. and that person has this thing, and they never think that multiple people can have the same problem, and then even less, right? This is something that almost no one thinks, right? Is there's a common problem amongst every philosophy. People don't think that way, right? People have a vague idea that there's Plato, there's Socrates, they heard about it in school, right? And that they must be different in some way. But they never realize that there's going to be, like, for example, collectivism. It encompasses all of communism, socialism, and mixed economy of today, right? People think that they're separate. Like, there's people who still argue today about Nazi Germany and Russia as being two different political systems, even though they're both socialist, they're both collectivist, right? They both have the underlying, like, philosophy of the individual means nothing. It's always the state first, or they hide it behind the people.
Let's talk about, like, example, right? Because following order has been, like, the thing that you have to do when you work in, especially for someone else, right? Because, like, let's make an example of you working for a company which has, like, 3 bosses, like 3 CEO, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, kind of like you gotta follow orders from this guy, and that you gotta follow other guys, like something like that. And what if you not having your own thinking and you keep working, you following orders from one guy and the other guy doesn't like it, like you know what I'm talking about?
You're saying, is there, so basically I'm essentially breaking down your argument into saying, is there such thing in an ideal society as a conflict of
Yes.
interest within men, right?
Right.
So in an ideal society there wouldn't be any conflict of interest because no one is forced to deal with anyone else, right? So, like, if I'm selling like porn, right, and then you don't like that and you think it's disgusting or something, you don't have to buy it from me, and I cannot force the government to make it illegal, right? And in a company that you're talking about, if we're working together on a project, right, and I have to do something, my boss wants me to change the project, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then in an ideal society, why did he pick someone that would that he doesn't trust their judgment on with something, that he has to constantly come in and micromanage everyone, right? That's not really a good, like, project, right? If he's not setting it up so that I know I picked, like, for example, let's say I want you to design like a logo for my company, like we're a graphics design company,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell Dante, I need you to design this shit and at least it look like cool, and then I come by and I say, I don't like the way it looks, change everything, I want it to look like this. In that situation, he should have just made it, right? Like,
Yeah.
why did he hire you? So I think in that situation, though, in an ideal society, that wouldn't have happened. It would have just been, I trust you to do this job, and if you do it wrong, then that's it, right? There is no try your best. There is no, right? It's just do your job. I hired you based on my judgment, so it's my responsibility if you fail, right? That's why I remember in Dagny when she takes responsibility for the train in the beginning of the story.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example of a good leader that is not part of a group. The bad example of what happens every day today is they actually treat it like we're a collective group, like we're a family or whatever. That's a horrible way to raise a company. And you know how modern companies who go public, right? When you go public as a company, you have your name on the stock market,
Mm-hmm.
which means you're no longer private. Now you have to listen to your shareholders. So shareholders, they all get in a meeting and they can actually vote on things. So you being a CEO are not even fully in control. Now this is not entirely true because there is also, you can also be a majority holder of your company, so you do have say. Like, for example, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, he owns a lot of the stock. So even though he is a public company, he can still make the most decisions because he owns all the vote, right? But in an ideal society, you wouldn't have a conflict. I hire you to do a job, and I hired on my judgment that you would do the job. If you don't do it right, then, like, I'm disappointed, I fire you or whatever, right? Because I was thinking of getting something out of you, but not the specifics of the project. If I hired you to do X thing, it's because I can't do it. I'm in the situation of making the decision of who will do it, not what he will do. Does that make sense? It's kind of confusing, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you cannot explain it to your boss when you're working, right? Like no way. Like, it's
No.
like in a situation of, like, every job right now, they're always trying to make, like, okay, this is a family, right? Like, from small business to big business, they always say, okay, let's treat all like a family.
Yeah, it's not
right?
not good.
So,
Because you're turning in the workplace, which should be an environment of individual achievement, right? So every individual has their purpose, and they're all working together for something. Like, first of all, even if, like, let's say we were inventing, like, a new phone or something, someone had to design the idea. Someone had to come up with, we're making a new phone. Someone had to come up with the internals, and someone had to come up with the manufacturing process, or maybe the design. Each person is still an individual. They're not working together per se as a collective, right? There's no such thing as a collective thought. Someone had to think of it. There's always down to the individual. So the biggest, you know what a milestone is, right? So in a timeline, there's like milestones are like little parts of accomplishments, right? So if you were to think about this phone that we're talking about, that we're making, as if you were breaking down to milestones, each milestone of like, oh, we designed how it was going to look. Now we designed how it's going to be made. We already talked to some people in China. We're going to set up a factory. All those milestones are always one guy who thought of the idea of doing it. There's no such thing as a collective mind in anything. The people who want to do that are trying to destroy society by limiting your power of yourself, right? Like, so this is why when people make the meme of like going to work is like ass and like it's bad, sitting in the computer being depressed, you go home, you eat by yourself, you go back, like that kind of meme, right? You've seen it since like the 90s, right?
Yes.
Like people hating corporate America, and that meme is perpetuated by this stupid philosophy of corporatism. And even just the lingo, the way they talk and like corporate, it's so like it's like the thing I was showing you earlier about how they never say anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
They speak but they don't say any ideas. They do the same thing but in corporate. It's like a different language. Like politics and the corporate, they have their own little shitty language that doesn't mean anything. They don't actually get anything done. This is why a lot of companies just don't get anything done. Like you seen the stock market, like Apple is like $300 a share. Like in an ideal world, in an actual like like an anime or something, when a company owns everything, like fucking Kaiba Corp or something, their stock would be worth like 10,000. But that's just how shitty the fucking open having your companies run the way they are is. Like fucking what's his name, Carnegie, right? Carnegie or the guy who made all the steel, or Rockefeller, who had all the oil. Their stock and their companies are so huge because they actually were in control. There was no government interference. They had individual control. That Rockefeller trusted himself and his ideas and other guys, and if he didn't do it right, he just fired, right? Like that's the way it was like supposed to be done. It was a good way. But now with all this stupid what's it called, like corporate shit, or what's called bureaucracy. Do you know what bureaucracy is, right? It's like if I want to get something done in a company, I gotta go through like all these people and all these hoops just to get one fucking thing done, right? Or I want to make our ad look like this, but like, oh, we got to run it through PR, public relations, and we see if it's going to work well with the people, and then I'll run it up to my superiors, because every superior, right, your boss, not your boss like CEO, but I'm talking about like your boss at the bottom of the office, right? He has another boss, and his boss has another boss and a boss, right? So having it set up this way incentivizes everyone to make the other guy happy. This is how China runs their politics. So in China, they have guys who are in charge of different regions in China, and and no matter the guys, they make the people on top give money to the people on the bottom so they can do something with it, right? And the guy will be like, hey, we need a new dam, and like, okay, here's like 10 million RMB, whatever, right? And the guy keeps 9 million of it and spends 1 million of it to find some guy to do it. Then the guy built it, and the guy tells the guy on top of him saying, oh, we got it done. Okay, good. This is the same thing that happens in the corporatism. This is why these companies, they're so rich, but they're actually not. Like imagine what Apple, for example, like is like I'm thinking of it because we're talking about phones. Imagine how much powerful it could be if it actually had freedom and it didn't have this dumb bullshit philosophy. They could be making like fucking next gen stuff, but we're stuck with the same fucking phone every single year because it works, because people are fucking retarded, and irrationalism is just so popular. But I know you're talking about smaller earlier. I just went on a tangent, but you're talking about like working at like a restaurant.
Right. Like not working like as like a really big one, but like talking about like from small to a big business, right? Like yeah, it's like almost like every business is like that right now, right?
I just went on a tangent with the corporate thing because I think I never told you about that. But I know it interests you more on the lower level.
Yeah, like because like we all start from low to high. So start talking like, okay, so we're talking about that, right? So is there no solution for now? Or like unless you being like a really big one and you being like,
well, there is a solution, because like
CEO.
if something, you have to know that every time I criticize something, it's I'm also implying that there is a solution, right?
Right. So
there actually was a solution to the system I said. It's kind of like what I said about Carnegie and everything, like the way that old capitalism actually worked. So but like in an ideal situation, like a small store, right? You would just go up and like, Joe, I need a job, and the guy's just like, okay. you start cleaning outside, right? And then maybe I let you work in the kitchen, right? Like that's how it used to work, like apprenticeships. The apprenticeship was a tradition that worked for like, I think since the
Asian time.
no, I think ever since like even ancient Egyptian. So like let's say 10, 15,000 years. No, 10,000 years, right? For the beginning of civilization, there was apprenticeship. That tradition, remember how I'm against like tradition and everything, but like if you're gonna go against tradition, you better have a good solution. But there hasn't been one yet of apprenticeship. I think apprenticeship works very well, and I feel like modern like corporate stuff has made the shit go down, right? Like even to the smaller areas.
You're talking about also about education nowadays, right? Like modern education, which means like you had to go to school to
that's
get a
part of
degree
it.
and this and that.
It's also like a business. Like colleges are business. They actually, there's a reason why Harvard looks so nice, right? There's a reason why it's really pretty and they keep it up clean. Like it's not a coincidence that they're so rich, right? It's not just because they're like, oh, we teach very well. No, it's a business, right? It's not just to go get a degree. It's a prestige thing. It's like, it's literally something out of the Fountainhead. Like, Rourke would never go to fucking Harvard to learn about architecture, right? Like, he would drop out of Harvard, which is literally what he did in the story, right? He dropped out of a fictional school. I forgot what the school is called, but Peter would gradually like go to that place and like graduate and hold it as a prestigious thing, because it's more important to have the prestige than to actually have the ability these days.
But it doesn't even work that way, because like right now, if you want to be an architecturist like broke, you cannot just go to Cameron and like ask for a job, right?
Yeah, because there's no Camerons.
There's no Cameron, but also there's like you need to have a degree to work. If not, they're not gonna allow you to work, right? Because the government like gonna be involved in and
but
stop you from working whatever you want.
So Cameron may not exist, right? Or maybe he does, but it's just very like few. But what does exist is the abilities that Rourke did, right? You could still make the work that Rourke did, and you could still be happy and successful that way. Like just like how Rourke makes his speech at the end in the
court,
and everyone like fucking cheers, right? It's because he's talking in a very like primal, not primal, but like in a level that everyone understood, like because it affected everyone's life. He literally made a philosophical speech, essentially, right? Even though he was talking about his job and why he had the right to destroy his own property, right? But that kind of thing still exists no matter what, even in the most shit society. That was Ayn Rand's whole purpose in the book, to show that someone like Rourke can exist. And I feel like maybe you still don't like think that that's possible or something.
Yes, it's very hard, especially like in a modern society right now, right? Because everyone's like gotta go through this rule and this and that.
Cause like that's what my dad would always tell me.
We are not actually free from doing whatever we want.
So my dad would always tell me is like, he would say, if you want people to listen to your like ideas, go to college and get a paper, and then people will listen. It's literally the dumbest shit I ever heard, right? Because if I'm just saying my idea, the merit of the idea should just hold its own, right? Regardless of the piece of paper behind it. But people these days are just literally that accustomed to that meme of going to college, blah, blah, doing that. And now the only practical purposes would be like if you're going to be a doctor and you literally need a license, right, to practice medicine, you actually need to go to college, right? Like you can't get around.
You cannot be an architect without a degree. You cannot be a doctor without a degree. You cannot just go to somewhere and learn this and that and be good. You cannot anymore.
So the issue with this system is that what if the like let's say some random guy called like John, right? What if John wanted to be a doctor, but he never could because he didn't want to go to college because college is shit, right?
Right.
So now he's stuck doing something that he probably doesn't like, and he can't experiment like how I said earlier about like, you know what, I want to be the best baker in the world. I want to make I want to make bread like the best in the world. He can't just go to a place, find the best guy, and say, I want to work for you. He can't do that as a doctor, right? He has to actually go through all this bullshit and get destroyed mentally and philosophically in college and in high school and all that. And then so he can come out of that. It's like kind of like a meat grinder, right? Like they just throw people in, and then the people who come out the bottom, you have to be literally a genius, right? To like somehow resist all that stuff and still come out a heroic person. So for some fields, there's just like, it's really difficult.
So even Francisco, right? Even Eddie Willis, they all have to go to college, right? Like, I don't think this is say in the book, but they went through a lot
Uh-huh.
to be like what they can do, like working for tech at Transcontinental. So.
Yeah, so I think what was more realistic was the Fountainhead in that situation, because the Fountainhead is a little more relevant to the individual. It's like a smaller story about like one guy. So I think that when Rand talked about them going to college, I don't think it was like that as a big of a deal. Even though most of the stuff that's written in Atlas Shrugged is like usually means something. I feel like when Dagny said, "I'm going to go to college because I want to learn about." Like the remember how and then I think Francisco said, well, I'm going to go to college to learn about philosophy so I can do business, and then he said I want to go and I want to learn about like chemistry so I know how to like extract. I feel like maybe I would disagree with that today with the way that we have our system now, because you can just learn that yourself, and plus Dagny was already going to run the company anyway, right? Because her dad was just going to give it the position to her brother and her, so they kind of had it already. Same thing with, but Reardon is different. So remember how Reardon, he actually grew up working from the bottom up. He actually saved up enough money to the point where he got a guy to give him a loan to start a company. Remember? I think maybe that comes up later, but that's how his past was. But regardless, I think that the more realistic and the more one that you should pay attention to is the Fountainhead. I think how Rourke went through all that, I think that's more relatable. I'm not saying that there's like the value is like the more relatable the better. I'm just saying like in this specific situation we're talking about in our world, it just sucks that there is no like apprenticeship stuff anymore. I can't go to like I can go to like an electronic chip maker for processors for phones, right? And say like I want to learn how to do it. No, it just doesn't work that way, right? Like this shit's already like a giant factory. Like it's really annoying, and. You see, you know, Marxists, right? So they actually complain about the same thing I'm complaining about, but their solution was a lot more evil. They wanted to just destroy everything by saying that we should go back to literally being fucking farmers, where everyone owned their own life, supposedly, right? Like we own the workforce. They didn't like the fact that other people owned other people, even though they didn't, right? Because like if I hired you to work for my company, you're not a slave. The way they saw it is that you were a slave, that you were a slave to the society. This is why Marxism is so popular with young people, right? Because it makes sense, right? It makes it sound like, oh, there's rich people and they're greedy and they're bad and I should be happy, because you should, right? Like everyone should be happy and they're entitled to their happiness. So that when they see that when they're young, they think, oh, it should be this way. And these people are destroying the way it works. And it's definitely not helping our situation here for getting an apprenticeship back. It's difficult.
So there's no way to be a doctor if you don't have a degree?
No.
No.
It's really annoying, because you can't specifically say I'm gonna be so much of a good doctor that I'm gonna work underground, right? Like I'm gonna operate people like and like it's gonna be secret, like no one's gonna know about this shit.
It's like a blackjack.
Yeah, it's like an underground like black market, like that kind of stuff doesn't like work in an actual free society. It just wouldn't work. But if the government, if the got out of the way of the economy, right, then things like that could work. Because then it would come down to your actual merit of doing something. Like if you're good at it, then I hire you, whatever. I don't care what race you are or what college you went to. I need a job done. I heard you do it well. I hire you. And that stuff can't happen with the way we have our economy and the politics set up. Because there's too much regulations, there's too much fucking like licenses you gotta get and all the dumb shit. Like, for example, I don't know if you knew this, but in Japan, an average business lasts for 50 years. And in America, it's 25 years on average, right? So it costs money to even just get a business license in America, right? Back then in America, dude, you just arrived here and you just started something. That was it. And the government just didn't give a shit. And it's kind of funny that now Japan more represents that old apprenticeship shit more than any other country.
Like sushi, like from sushi to like big things, right?
Yeah, like you can literally go to in Japan if you're Japanese, because this is a little different with foreigners, right? Let's say you are a Japanese guy, and you want to start like a company that like for repairing shoes, right? Like if you want to do that in America, it's over. Like you go out of business. Like who the fuck goes there anymore? People just buy new shoes, right? But there are people that value getting their shoes repaired if they're like nice, and you will always have business because the government kind of like lays off, right? They don't tax you as much, and you're just like free to do whatever random business you want to do, and that's why businesses last so long, and also because the work ethic that the Japanese have is different than Americans. Where a lot of Americans, because of their way that they view money and finance, they're a lot more short term, so they're more quick to cash out, right? Get in, get out as fast as possible. Again, it's no coincidence that American companies only last 25 years on average. Like 50 years as the average in Japan. That's crazy. For opening like anything.
Anything.
Yeah.
That's like a lifetime for one person already.
Because even in the place where I went to get the Yu-Gi-Oh cards, right, in Akihabara, the guy who runs it is like this old ass guy. He's like fucking 1,000 years old kind of guy, and he knows nothing about fucking Yu-Gi-Oh cards or anything. Right before, when he was younger, when he was like 30, instead of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, it was like other stuff. It was like computer parts. But then he moved on. He changed his company to sell cards. In the last like 20 years, in like the 90s, when like cards became something, and like you can't do that in America. Like you just go out of business because you can't keep up with the rent or something. The thing that like, if the government were to just get the fuck out of the way with the economy, I think jobs would be better, and I feel people's purpose would be fulfilled better. And I'm not saying this because I know you don't know what I'm saying right now, maybe, but like I know people who will be listening to this will listen to my argument, and I'm sounding like a Marxist right now, but it's not the same. When I'm saying about modern capitalism is destroying lives, because what we have today, what we have today is not capitalism. So I kind of agree with the Marxists what they're saying, but they're not the exact. Our argument is not geared to the right position, because we're living in a mixed economy. This is not a capitalist economy. So the argument of capitalism is destroying people's lives or whatever, and making everyone into work drones or whatever, like people who just go to work, come back, go to work, come back, right? First of all, in an ideal world, you would want to go to work.
Yeah.
Like Rourke would want to do nothing less than to go to work. He would want to keep designing buildings because he loves that.
Like Raiden would go to work, right? Because he want to work.
Yeah, but like no one loves to go to McDonald's to work, right? But that's fine, because in even in an ideal world, there would still be people working at a McDonald's or cleaning toilets, because someone still needs a job to get into something else. Someone still needs to get a job to save money to do a next project.